The morning I found the hidden safe behind the bookshelf in my employer's study was the morning everything changed. Inside were documents that should not exist. A second will, bank statements, with forged signatures, and a letter, handwritten, shaking, desperate, that began with the words, "If you are reading this, I am no longer able to speak for myself. Someone in this house has made sure of that." The man who wrote that letter was sitting 30 feet away in a wheelchair, staring out the window, unable to form a complete sentence. And the people who put him there were arriving for Sunday dinner in less than 2 hours. But let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Ruth Calloway. I am 63 years old. I have grey hair that I keep pinned back, reading glasses I lose at least twice a day, and hands that have graded thousands of homework papers over 31 years of teaching 5th grade in Knoxville, Tennessee. I retired 2 years ago. I thought retirement would be peaceful. I was wrong. My daughter, Ellie, passed away 4 years ago from a brain aneurysm. She was only 34. One moment she was laughing on the phone with me about a recipe she had ruined. The next moment she was gone. She left behind her son, my grandson, Tommy. He was 6 at the time. I became his legal guardian. Tommy is the light of my life. He has his mother's eyes and her stubborn spirit. He calls me Grandma Roo, and he believes I can fix anything. But I could not fix what came next. When Tommy was 9, he started getting tired all the time. Then came the bruises that would not heal. Then came the diagnosis, aplastic anemia. His bone marrow was failing. The doctors said he needed a transplant. They found a match through the registry. But the procedure, the hospital stay, the aftercare, it all added up to a number that made my stomach drop. My insurance covered part of it. Not enough. My retirement savings covered more. Still not enough. I sold my car. I borrowed from every friend I had. I was still short by over $100,000. One evening I sat at my kitchen table staring at bills and cried until I had nothing left. Tommy walked in wearing his pajamas. He sat beside me and said, "Grandma Roo, are you sad because of me?" I wiped my face quickly. "No, baby. I am sad because the world is expensive." He put his small hand on mine. "Maybe we can sell lemonade." I laughed through my tears. That boy kept me going. That was when I saw the job listing. Live-in private nurse and companion for retired federal judge, room and board included. Salary generous. Must be patient, trustworthy, and comfortable with long-term care. The pay was 3 times what any normal nursing aide position offered. I was not a nurse, but I had spent 2 years caring for my mother before she passed, and I had my CNA certification from that experience. I applied. The interview was at a large estate outside Savannah, Georgia. The house sat behind iron gates and oak trees draped with Spanish moss. It looked like something from a painting. A woman named Aldridge Webb met me at the door. She was 44, blonde, polished, every detail perfect from her nails to her smile. She shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Calloway, thank you for coming all this way." She introduced me to her brother, Derek Aldridge, who was 48. He had sharp features and wore an expensive watch that he kept glancing at, as if my interview was keeping him from something more important. They explained that their uncle, Judge Henry Aldridge, had suffered a severe stroke 8 months ago. He had limited speech, limited mobility, and required around-the-clock assistance. The previous caretaker had left suddenly. "Uncle Henry is a proud man," Carolyn said softly. "He does not like strangers, but he needs someone kind." Derek added, "We manage his affairs, his finances, his medical appointments. You would only need to focus on his daily comfort." They offered me the job on the spot. The salary was extraordinary. When I asked about an advance for a family medical emergency, Carolyn did not hesitate. Of course, family comes first. I moved into the Aldridge estate 2 weeks later. Tommy stayed with my closest friend, Barbara, back in Knoxville. His transplant was scheduled for the following month. The advance from the Aldridges covered the remaining cost. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Judge Henry Aldridge was 75 years old. He sat in a motorized wheelchair near the bay window of the main parlor when I first met him. He was thin, his white hair neatly combed, his blue eyes sharp behind heavy lids. He could not walk. His right side was mostly paralyzed. His speech came in fragments, slow, broken, sometimes just single words. But when he looked at me, I saw something I did not expect. Clarity. His mind was there, trapped behind a body that would not cooperate. "Good morning, Judge Aldridge," I said gently. "I am Ruth. I will be helping you from now on." He stared at me for a long time. Then, with great effort, he whispered one word: "Careful." I thought he meant be careful with him. Be gentle. Later I would understand he meant something very different. The first few weeks were routine. I helped Henry with meals, bathing, physical therapy exercises, medication. He took a cocktail of pills every morning and evening, all organized by Carolyn into a labeled dispenser. The estate had a housekeeper named Rosa, a quiet woman in her 50s who had worked for the judge for 12 years. She cooked, cleaned, and kept to herself. She and I exchanged polite nods but little conversation. Derek visited twice a week, always going straight to the judge's study. Carolyn came every other day, always checking on Henry's medication, always asking me detailed questions about his condition. Is he eating well? How is his speech today? Any changes in behavior? At first I thought they were caring relatives, attentive, responsible, but small things began to bother me. Henry's medication made him drowsy, extremely drowsy. Some days he could barely keep his eyes open past noon. On those days, his speech was worse, almost non-existent. But on mornings when he seemed more alert, when the fog lifted slightly, he would try to speak to me. He would grip my wrist with his good hand and push out words like they cost him everything. "Not right," he said one morning. "What is not right, Judge?" I asked. His eyes moved toward the pill dispenser on his nightstand. He squeezed my wrist harder, too much. I looked at the pills. They were the same ones Carolyn prepared every week. I made a mental note but did not push further. Maybe he was confused. Stroke patients often are. Then I noticed something else. Whenever Henry had a good day, a day where he seemed sharper, more present, Carolyn would arrive that evening and adjust his medication. The doctor recommended a small increase, she would say casually, and by the next morning, Henry would be foggy again. I started paying closer attention. One Tuesday, I quietly counted his pills before Carolyn's visit. After she left, I counted again. There were 2 extra pills in the evening slot. They were small, round and white, identical to his sedative, but there was one more of each than the prescription called for. I said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I began keeping a small notebook hidden in my apron pocket. Dates, pill counts, Henry's alertness levels. After 10 days, the pattern was undeniable. On days with the standard dose, Henry was more awake, more verbal, more himself. On days after Carolyn adjusted the pills, he was nearly comatose. Someone was deliberately keeping this man sedated. And I needed to understand why. The answer came on a Thursday afternoon. Derek was in the study with the door closed. I was bringing Henry his lunch in the hallway just outside. The door was thick, but Derek was on a phone call, and his voice carried. "The conservatorship hearing is in 6 weeks," he said. "As long as he cannot testify coherently, we are fine. The judge ruled last time that his mental capacity was insufficient. No, she does not suspect anything. She is just a hired aide. Yes, the transfers are almost complete." My hands trembled. I stood perfectly still, holding the lunch tray, barely breathing. Conservatorship, transfers. He cannot testify. This was not about caring for a sick uncle. This was about controlling him. They were keeping Henry drugged so he could not speak for himself while they moved his money and took legal control of his estate. I brought Henry his lunch as if nothing had happened. But inside, my mind was racing. I needed proof. Real proof. And unlike the stories you hear where people hesitate and wait until it is almost too late, I was not going to make that mistake. 31 years of teaching 10-year-olds had taught me one thing. When you see a bully hurting someone who cannot defend themselves, you act. You do not wait for a better moment. You make the moment. That evening, after Henry was asleep and the house was quiet, I went to Rosa. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes. I closed the door behind me. "Rosa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She looked at me cautiously. "What is it? Why did the last caretaker leave?" Rosa's hands stopped moving in the water. She dried them slowly. She asked too many questions. "About what?" Rosa looked toward the door, then back at me. "About the medicine. About why the judge could not speak on days when Mr. Derek had visitors." About the papers she saw Mr. Derrick bringing for the judge to sign. Did the judge sign them? Rosa's eyes filled with something between fear and sadness. They put a pen in his hand when he could barely see straight. They guided his wrist. My blood went cold. Rosa, that is forgery. She nodded slowly. I know, but I have no papers, no visa. They told me if I said anything, they would have me deported. I have 2 children in school here. I reached across the counter and took her hand. Nobody is deporting anyone. But I need your help. Rosa stared at me for a long moment. Then she whispered, the study, behind the tall bookshelf on the right wall. There is a panel. The judge showed me years ago, before the stroke. He told me it was his insurance policy. The next morning, I waited for Derek and Carolyn to leave for a meeting downtown. I went into the study, found the tall bookshelf, and felt along the right edge. There was a slight gap. I pressed it, and a small panel clicked open, revealing a wall safe with a combination lock. I tried the judge's birthday. Nothing. I tried the year he was appointed to the federal bench. The lock clicked open. Inside, I found everything. A second will, dated just 2 weeks before his stroke, leaving 70% of his estate to a charitable trust for legal aid in rural communities. A letter in his handwriting describing his fears that Derek and Carolyn were trying to pressure him into changing the will. Bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, totaling over $3 million, all signed with shaky versions of Henry's signature. And the letter I mentioned at the beginning, the one that started with, "If you are reading this, I am no longer able to speak for myself." In that letter, Henry named his personal attorney, a man called Mr. Whitfield in Charleston. He wrote, "Contact him. He has copies of my true will. He will know what to do." I photographed every single document with my phone. Then I put everything back exactly as it was and closed the safe. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. If you are listening right now, let me ask you something. What would you do? You are alone in a house with people who have the money, the lawyers, and the power to destroy you. You have a grandson counting on you back home. Walking away would be the safest choice. But there is a man in a wheelchair who wrote a letter begging for help, and you might be the only person who read it. Would you stay quiet, or would you fight? Drop a comment and tell me. And make sure you subscribe, because what happened next nearly cost me everything. That afternoon, I called Mr. Whitfield's office from the garden where no one could hear me. His secretary put me through immediately when I mentioned Judge Aldridge. "Mrs. Calloway, Mr. Whitfield said, his voice calm and steady. "Henry told me years ago that if anyone ever called me using the phrase insurance policy, I should listen very carefully. I told him everything. The over-medication, the forged signatures, the bank transfers, Derek's phone call about the conservatorship hearing. Mr. Whitfield listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, 'Can you get Judge Aldridge to a point where he can communicate clearly, even briefly? If I can control his medication for 48 hours, yes. I believe I can. Then do it. I will handle the rest. But Mrs. Calloway, you must be very careful. Derek Aldridge has connections in local law enforcement. If you go to the Savannah police directly, it could be buried before it starts. Let me contact federal authorities. Financial fraud against a former federal judge will get their attention fast.' I agreed. We set a plan. The next morning, I made a decision that terrified me. When Carolyn's preloaded pill dispenser sat on the counter, I removed the 2 extra sedatives from both the morning and evening doses. I replaced them with vitamin tablets that looked nearly identical, ones I had picked up from the pharmacy the day before. If Carolyn checked the dispenser, she would see the right number of pills, but Henry would not be getting the drugs that kept him silent. By that evening, Henry was already more alert than I had seen him in weeks. His eyes tracked my movements. He squeezed my hand when I adjusted his blanket. "Ruth," he said. A full word. Clear. "I am here, Judge." He looked at me with an intensity that made my chest ache. "They are stealing." "I know," I said softly, "and we are going to stop them." The next morning, Henry spoke in short sentences. By afternoon, he could hold a brief conversation. His speech was still slow, still effortful, but the fog was lifting. The man behind the stroke damage was emerging, and he was angry. "Derek, power of attorney," he said. "I never signed it." "I know. They forged it." His jaw tightened. Carolyn. My pills. I know that too. He grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Thank you. But Derek noticed. He arrived that Thursday and immediately commented, Uncle Henry seems agitated today. More restless than usual. He looked at me. Have you changed anything in his routine? No, I said evenly. He had a good night's sleep. Derek studied me. Then he pulled out his phone and called Carolyn. Come by tonight. We may need to adjust his evening dose. I overheard that call. They were going to increase the sedation. I had maybe 24 hours before they realized what I had done with the pills and shut everything down. That night, I called Mr. Whitfield. We need to move faster. Federal agents will be in Savannah by morning, he said. Can you keep things stable until then? I will do my best. Around 10 that night, Carolyn arrived unannounced. She walked straight to Henry's bedroom. I was sitting beside him, reading aloud from a book of Civil War history he liked. Ruth, I will take over his evening medication tonight, she said sweetly. Of course, I replied. I stood and moved toward the door, but I did not leave. I stood just outside, listening. I heard her open the pill dispenser. A pause, then a longer pause. She was counting. My heart hammered. Ruth, she called. Her voice was different now. Tight. Could you come here for a moment? I stepped back in. Yes? She held up one of the vitamin tablets between her fingers. This does not look like his usual prescription. I did not flinch. Carolyn, those are the pills from the dispenser you prepared. Her eyes narrowed. I prepared his actual medication. This is not it. Before she could say another word, Henry spoke from his wheelchair. Clear. Loud. Louder than I had heard him speak in months. Carolyn. She froze. Her face went white. I know. What you have been doing. The room became very still. Carolyn's hand closed around the pill. She turned to me, and for the first time, the mask came off entirely. You stupid woman, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you have done? This estate is worth $40 million. Derek and I have spent years positioning ourselves. Years. And you, a hired caretaker from nowhere, Tennessee, think you can interfere. I am not interfering, I said calmly. I am protecting my patient. She took a step toward me. You are out of your depth. Derek controls the legal authority. The doctors report to us. The conservatorship hearing will confirm Uncle Henry is incompetent. Nothing you do matters. Henry's voice cut through again. I am not incompetent. Carolyn stared at him. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt exactly. More like surprise that he was still in there, still fighting. Then it was gone. Get out of this room, Ruth, she said coldly. You are fired. I want you gone by morning. I did not move. You do not have the authority to fire me. Only the judge does. She laughed bitterly. Derek has power of attorney. A forged power of attorney, I replied. The colour drained from her face completely. I found the safe, Carolyn. I read the letter. I saw the bank statements. And Judge Aldridge's real attorney has seen all of it. She stood perfectly still for 3 seconds. Then she turned and walked out of the room. I heard her calling Derek before she even reached the hallway. I locked Henry's bedroom door from the inside and sat beside him. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Ruth, I wrote that letter, praying someone would find it. Someone did, I said. And help is coming. It was a long night. Derek arrived at midnight, pounding on the bedroom door. Open this door, Ruth. You are trespassing. I did not open it. I called Mr. Whitfield, who called the federal agents. Derek's pounding eventually stopped. The house went silent. I sat in the chair beside Henry's bed and did not sleep. At 7 in the morning, 2 black SUVs pulled through the estate gates. 4 federal agents and Mr. Whitfield walked up the front steps. I opened the bedroom door and led them to the parlour. Derek was sitting at the dining table with coffee, trying to look casual. Carolyn stood by the window, arms crossed. When she saw the agents, her composure cracked. Mr. Whitfield spoke first. I am here on behalf of Judge Henry Aldridge, pursuant to his written directive. He placed the original will, the forged documents, and the bank records on the table. These materials, along with medical records subpoenaed this morning, establish a pattern of financial fraud, document forgery, and deliberate medical abuse against a federal retiree. Derek stood up slowly. This is a family matter. The lead agent shook his head. Wire fraud involving interstate bank transfers makes it a federal matter, Mr. Aldridge. Carolyn turned to me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He was going to give it all away. $40 million to strangers. We are his family. We deserved that money. You deserved nothing, I said quietly. You drugged a helpless man and stole from him while he sat in a wheelchair, unable to call for help. That is not family. That is cruelty. Derek and Carolyn were arrested that morning. The charges included financial elder abuse, forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit unlawful restraint through chemical sedation. The conservatorship petition was dismissed. A court-appointed medical team took over Henry's care and confirmed that prolonged oversedation had significantly worsened his condition beyond what the stroke alone had caused. With proper treatment, they said, he could recover considerably. And he did. Over the next 3 months, Henry regained much of his speech. He could feed himself. He began taking short walks with a physical therapist. The first time he stood up from that wheelchair and took 4 steps across the parlor, I cried. He looked at me and said, with full clarity, "You gave me my voice back, Ruth." Tommy's transplant happened on schedule. Barbara brought him to Savannah to recover so I could be nearby. The first time Tommy met Henry, the old judge let the boy sit in his wheelchair and push the joystick around the garden. Tommy laughed so hard he nearly fell out. Henry laughed too. It was the first time Rosa said she had heard him laugh in over 2 years. Henry did exactly what his real will intended. He established the Aldridge Foundation for Rural Legal Aid, funding free legal services for families in underserved communities across the South. He also set up a medical trust, and Tommy's ongoing care was covered completely. When I protested, Henry shook his head firmly. "You saved my life and asked for nothing in return. Let me do this one thing." Derek received 7 years in federal prison. Carolyn received 5, with mandatory restitution. At her sentencing, she looked back at me from the defendant's table. I expected hatred. Instead, I saw exhaustion, the kind that comes when you have been carrying a lie so long it finally crushes you. Months later, I received a letter from Derek in prison. One line stood out. I told myself I deserved what was his because he never gave us enough attention. But attention and money are not the same thing, and I learned that too late. I wrote back. I did not forgive what he had done, but I told him that understanding why you did something wrong is the first step toward becoming someone who would not do it again. I still live at the estate. Henry asked me to stay, and I had no reason to refuse. Tommy goes to school in Savannah now. He and Henry play chess in the afternoons. Tommy is terrible at it. Henry lets him win sometimes. Rosa makes Sunday dinners that bring the whole house together. The gates stay open now. Visitors come and go. The silence that once protected secrets has been replaced by something better. Noise. Laughter. Life. If there is one thing this experience taught me, it is something Henry wrote in that hidden letter long before I ever arrived. He wrote, "Evil does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, adjusts your pills, and smiles while it robs you blind. The most dangerous people are not the ones who threaten you. They are the ones who quietly remove your ability to speak. And the most powerful thing you can do for someone who has been silenced is simple. Listen, pay attention, and refuse to look away." I came to Savannah to save my grandson. I did not expect to save anyone else. But sometimes life puts you exactly where someone needs you, and the only question that matters is whether you are brave enough to stay. I was just a retired schoolteacher from Tennessee, but I paid attention, and that made all the difference. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to like and leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever seen someone being taken advantage of and had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent? I want to hear your story. And subscribe to this channel, because every week I bring you true stories about ordinary people who found the courage to fight back when it mattered most. Because sometimes the person who changes everything is not the strongest or the richest. It is the one who simply refuses to stay quiet.